CADcast will cover SolidWorks Utilities Part 1. I'm Quentin Rock. So what is SolidWorks Utilities? SolidWorks Utilities is a set of tools that lets you examine your parts, analyze your parts. It lets you automate many of the tedious tasks or speed up many of the tedious tasks we do in everyday CAD. So it's basically a set of utilities that's inside of SolidWorks Professional and higher packages. So if you have SolidWorks Professional or SolidWorks Premium, you have this. You'll see the same buttons you see on my screen here in SolidWorks. If you don't have that, or you don't have an active license because somebody else has got it on the network already, you won't see these buttons. So this is a two-part CADcast. The first part, we're going to cover the compare utility. This is a big area in SolidWorks Utilities where you're able to compare documents based on file properties, your document properties, custom properties. You can compare features of one part to the other, so it'll look at the parameters of the features and compare between them. You can compare geometry, which is especially useful when you have a non-native SolidWorks file. So for example, you get an IGES file and you're trying to compare it to your original or an earlier version. And you can compare bill of materials. And all those compare utilities are actually pretty powerful tools that you may be putting screens side by side trying to figure out what the difference was between version 1 or revision 1 and revision 2. So there's some great utilities in SolidWorks, and I guarantee you by the end of this CADcast, you're probably going to be saying to yourself that you could have used these last week if you knew they existed. So that's the big point of this webcast, is to get these out there. SolidWorks Utilities has been around. I tried to do a little research to see how long it's in there, but I know it's been around for at least 10 versions, if not maybe 12 or so. I think SolidWorks 2000 or 2001, somewhere in that range, where they actually introduced this set of tools. And they've added things since then, but it's been around a long time, and it's a pretty rarely used thing, at least from what I can tell in the tech support department. And remember, this is a two-part series, so a lot of the smaller utilities I put into part 2 to go ahead and split this up into just a easier to digest CADcast. So where is SolidWorks Utilities? So as I mentioned, it is an add-in available in the professional and premium versions, and you can find those by going to Tools, Add-ins, and checking SolidWorks Utilities. In fact, what happens now, though, is you really don't even need to worry about turning it on. If you invoke one of the commands that utility needs, it'll automatically turn itself on in the background. There is no toolbar, so you can't go into SolidWorks and turn on the SolidWorks Utilities toolbar. You'll find as we go through this CADcast, most of the commands are available in the Tools pull-down menu, or also on the Evaluate tab inside of SolidWorks on the Command Manager. There are buttons for every single command, though, so if you do want to add some of these buttons, you can customize, go to Tools, Customize, and add the buttons. You'll find most of them underneath the Tools section of the Command section, or Command tab, in the Customize dialog box. And one thing I always point out, the last couple versions, they've had the ability to run a command search. That little search box is at the top right of your SolidWorks window. You can switch it to command searches. So if you're ever trying to find one of these utilities and you don't know where it is, it's just easier to type it in and it'll point it to you, or just launch it from the search commands application. So without further ado, let's get started with part 1. The first utility to take a look at is actually a set of utilities where you're able to compare two documents or two configurations of the same document, or in the case of PDM, two versions or revisions of a document based on different checks. So it's actually 4 utilities, one to run the document properties, one to check features, so check the feature tree of one part versus the other, one to check geometry, which is especially useful when you don't have a feature tree, it's imported geometry, or when you're comparing maybe an assembly to an assembly, it can check just if the geometry matches up. And of course a bill of materials to compare between two different versions of a drawing, or if you put a bill of materials in 3D assembly. So our first utility to take a look at will be the compare documents tool. And what this does is it basically will check the file properties summary of a file, which is if you right-click on Windows and go into the properties, it'll check things like the custom properties inside of SolidWorks, and it'll also check the document properties. So let's jump over to SolidWorks and take a look at that. I have here just a simple arm part, and you'll see I have a Rev 1 and a Rev 2, and both of them are open in SolidWorks, although this is not needed to run the utility. I'll go to Tools, Compare, Documents, and you'll see that on the right that task pane has popped up with the Compare utility. And it just asks you a few simple questions. One, what do you want to compare from? What's the reference document? So I'll pick the Rev 1 part. And what do I want to compare to? I'll pick the Rev 2 part. You'll notice here that all I have to do is run comparison. If the parts aren't open, you can hit the Browse button and browse to those parts. You'll also notice that there's a Within Enterprise PDM Vault grayed out. The reason for that is I don't have the add-in turned on right now, but if I turn the add-in on, that won't be grayed out, and I can browse to my vault, and then it will prompt me or allow me to pick from different versions of the same file. So I don't have to have separate files for that. If I click Run Comparison, it'll come through and it'll give me, or the results it gives me are, again, the Windows file properties or the custom properties in SolidWorks. Gives me some instances here where face counts, so I can see that some of the faces don't match up, or there's more faces in one part versus the other. Right away I can tell there's going to be some difference between these components. And then things like document properties. So you can see here, this is actually the tools, options, document properties, detailing section, and then the dimension sections. I've changed the precision of the primary units from 3 decimal places to 2 decimal places. So you get an idea of some of the things it can compare. With most of the utilities, or a good amount of the utilities, you're actually able to save out a report also. And you just hit save and give it a name. And I'll come back to the reports when I get to the report manager at the end of this CADcast. So next on the compare utility is the ability to compare features from one part to the other. And I'll switch over to SolidWorks again and we'll take a look here. It can also compare between two configurations, and I can show you that as well. Notice I still have the compare documents box up. If you actually click out here, or if you look at the toolbar, you'll see that everything is grayed out when you're running a utility. And this is the case with most utilities, not just the compare utility. So as you'll see, I have to close out of the utility to actually gain access back. So when a utility is active, any SolidWorks utility, in most cases, depending on the utility, it's going to lock out SolidWorks. You can't even hit the red X in the top corner to close the application. You can't do anything but close out the utility first. So it's a little bit of a gotcha there as well. Again, so to run the compare utility, I'll go to Tools, Compare. And as you saw before, I could actually click Documents again, or I could go straight to the features, and it just has this checked. So it doesn't really matter which compare utility you launch up. You can pick each one you want later. Let's do the same comparison, but based on a feature level. And you'll see that SolidWorks has given me some results. It tells me which features are unique, if there was a new feature added, which features are modified, and you'll see that I have one unique feature in Rev 2. If I click on it, you can see it highlights out in the graphics area, the bottom half Rev 2 part, what that feature is. It's, in this case, it's a fillet that I didn't have in there. If I click on one of these chamfers, I can see down at the bottom half of the compare utility the difference in the value. One was a millimeter chamfer and the other is a 1.2 millimeter chamfer. So this is a great utility to compare SolidWorks files or configurations of SolidWorks files together. Again, it's locked out, or everything is grayed out till I actually close this application. So remember that you do have to close the application or the utility in the task pane to free SolidWorks back up. Our third compare utility is the compare geometry tool. This can be useful for SolidWorks native parts, but it's especially useful when you have imported geometry or you're comparing a SolidWorks file to maybe one you sent out to a vendor or a consultant and they sent it back with some changes. You can compare the two, especially if it's been IGEST out or Parasolid out where it comes in as a dummy solid and there's no feature tree. This also works on assemblies, although there is one limitation. Let's jump into SolidWorks and take a look at our familiar arm part here. And again, to launch up the compare, go to Tools, Compare, and you can pick any one of these. I'll pick Geometry in this case. Again, you have to select or browse to the files that you want to compare and hit Run Comparison. You also see there's an option here to align parts. So before you run the comparison, you're able to actually, if these parts came in or it came back from your vendor or your consultant in a different orientation, you can throw in a coordinate system and align the two coordinate systems from the old part to the new part. So it can be especially useful if you need to do something like that, or for whatever reason a part that you downloaded doesn't match the part that you built. And you'll see what you get is simply a volume comparison or a face comparison, and you can see I can check either one of these and I can see what's the difference here. You also get these little eyeglass icons, and those will actually show you the areas of where those comparisons are different. So you can see as I click the eyeglass icon on the volume of the material removed, you can see between the iterations that's the material removed. So the bottom half is both parts put together basically. You can see by the title of the dialog or the window here. You can also run this utility in an assembly, but you're only going to get volume comparison. On assembly level, it will not give you face comparison results. There is an option here to keep the colors. If we go back and uncheck this eyeglasses, you'll see there's an option to keep those colors. Again, there's a save report button so we can save out these results as a report. And again, I'll touch on that a little bit later in this CADcast. And our final compare utility is the compare bill of materials tool. And this will compare two bill of materials between two SolidWorks documents, whether it's a SolidWorks assembly and you inserted a bill of materials in the 3D mode or into the drawing. And you can actually compare two assemblies or two drawings or a drawing and an assembly. Keep in mind this is the SolidWorks bill of materials functionality and not Excel-based BOMs or the bill of materials inside of Enterprise PDM. There's already a built-in compare tool inside of Enterprise PDM for that. So let's take a look at how this works. In SolidWorks, go to Tools, Compare, and of course click Bill of Materials this time. Pick your reference documents or browse to them. I actually have two drawings open here as well. And if for some reason this was a multi-page drawing and there was more than one bill of materials, it does have a pull-down list for me to be able to select which two bill of materials to put together. By default, it's just going to take the first one it finds on the first sheet available. You can also specify some different types of criteria for what it's actually going to run a comparison to. I'll click Run Comparison, and we can see that there are some extra columns in one bill of material versus the other. See if I can zoom in here and show you the different bill of materials. So in this case, there's an extra column. It tells me it's the material column. There's some extra rows. It says that some of these rows are different. So really all it's doing is comparing the text in row 1 versus the text in row 1 of the other, and the text in row 2 versus the text in row 2. So if you reordered the bill of materials, it will still show as being different in there. Again, you can save this utility or save this out as a report, and we'll view that later on. But essentially just save it to a folder with a specific name. So those were the 4 compare utilities in SolidWorks Utilities. What I'd like to do is jump back into SolidWorks real quick and just show you a couple more things that are helpful with those compare tools. So again, you can launch up any of them by going to Tools, Compare, and Documents or Features, whatever. And I'm just going to do the same compare. One thing to mention is you can check multiple studies to run or multiple compare tools to run at once. And when I click run, what'll happen is it'll actually go through and run all those studies at once, all 3 of them, and then it'll put tabs across the top. So there's the features tab, there's the geometry compare tab, and then there's this generic compare documents tab. So keep that in mind, you're able to do that. There's also an options button that brings up the different types of how it's comparing things. So if you want to change colors or what the report looks like or where it puts it, how many views it saves out, you can go through and explore these options a little further and see what's available. Again, mentioning that everything is grayed out on this toolbar, you'll notice when you're in a compare utility or in any of the SolidWorks utilities that run in the task pane. And if you save out now, you can save all reports at once as well. The last gotcha I kind of want to show here is if I wanted to compare multiple configurations, so this revision 1 actually has multiple configurations. If I just pick from the list like this, it'll give me this message saying they're identical, you can't compare them. What you have to actually do is hit the browse button here, and I'll go to my part. And then from the configuration pull down, you can pick a different configuration and then hit open, and you won't get that message. And you're able to run comparison between configurations. So those are the compare utilities in SolidWorks Utilities. One great utility in SolidWorks Utilities is the Feature Paint tool. This allows you to copy the stuff from one feature to another feature. And that is any of the parameters or any of the stuff you entered in between features or anything that makes the feature level different. Keep in mind it's not sketches, it's features. Let's take a look at SolidWorks here. The Feature Paint tool, like most utilities, is located underneath the Tools pull-down menu inside of SolidWorks. Once launched up, you'll see over here on the right in the task pane, you basically have a copy from and paste to options. And that's all it really is. It's copying the feature properties from one and pasting it to another feature in the tree. So for example, I'm just going to go ahead and select as my copy from this red hole. And what I can do is I'll pick this third hole here, or this third cut extrude in my part, and you get an idea of what it's doing over here in the right on the task pane. You can choose to copy the appearances or not copy the appearances. And I'll leave that off for a second so you can see what it's doing. And essentially the way I look at it is it's copying everything from the property manager of the feature and pasting that to a property manager of the other feature. So if things match up, for example, this direction 1 depth, the first line here, it's able to take that value from the first one and paste it to the other. If things don't match up, it's not able to paste those. I'll clear this out. This is a simple cut that has a 50 in there. Let's go ahead and paste this actually. And you'll see I just hit apply and it pastes to that. You'll notice it didn't change the size of the hole. Remember, this is only a feature, not a sketch paint. It's a feature paint. So the sketches could be different, but the features themselves, the properties, can be pasted over. If I select that same hole and pick this sweep, for example, you'll see none of the property managers for these features are going to match up. So the only thing that it's actually going to be able to paste over is the visual properties or the appearance properties of that. But I can do this. I can go ahead and apply that. So it might be a good way to use this tool as a shortcut. If I come in here and I say, okay, let's remove this one out and pick the original sweep here, you'll see there's a lot more options between two sweeps that it's able to copy across. So just keep in mind that even though you're able to copy and paste, you may not be able to copy and paste everything. I'll do one more example here where I go back and I pick my original cut extrude, and I'm going to remove that sweep out of there. And I'll just pick the second, this orange one. You'll notice if I turn off the appearance paste properties, you'll notice there's very little stuff in there. In fact, only the flip side to cut is the only option available to paste. I'm Go ahead and close this out and just show you why. If you look at this dimension right here, you'll get an idea, but basically this cut extrude was a offset from surface. It was not a blind depth like the original cut extrude here. So it's not able to match those properties up, and it's not able to paste values in there. So you can bring the appearance over, you can bring some of the stuff, but if the dialog boxes or the sections of the property managers don't match up, it's unable to paste those. One other important thing to note about Feature Paint is if I do select a feature, I can paste into a different part. So if you're trying to match up parts, this is really nice. So you'll see I can pick this cut extrude from the other part while the window's still open and paste that across. So that wraps up part 1 of our SolidWorks Utilities CAD cast. Please make sure to check out part 2 where we'll go through some other great utilities and tools to make your everyday CAD life a lot easier. Thank you for viewing this Digital Dimensions CAD cast. Please visit us at www.ddicad.com.